Recording. Okay, and all right, so thanks for joining us this afternoon or this morning for those of us on the West Coast. I am Jill Stewart. I know some of you, but I don't think everyone, so I'll just quickly introduce myself. I joined the AffiniQuest team last November as product manager. So I've been working closely with Jeff Shai and others at AffiniQuest on learning AffiniQuest and working on roadmap and just really getting into the product, and also working on customer communications and building up our customer community. So today I'm going to talk very briefly about the AffiniQuest community and the support site, and I would encourage everyone to join the AffiniQuest community if you're not already part of that, and participate so we can all continue to learn from each other. And then after that, I'm going to turn it over to Jeff, who is going to give a presentation that he gave at Salesforce conference about a month ago on the benefits of Salesforce and some other items there. So just briefly on the community. If you're not already on the community, it's very easy to join. I'll demonstrate in just a moment, but I'll send out this slides after this meeting, so you have this as well. And once you join the community, you can contribute to the various options on there. So let me go ahead and just bring that up. Okay, so if you are not already a member of the community, you can just go to the link that we'll send out. And if you're not already on there, you can just click sign up, and you will get information to just enter your email and your name, and you can sign up and create your account. Okay, and then once you're in the community, you have access to the knowledge base, to search articles. All of the release notes and configurations for each release are stored out here as well. And if you scroll down a little bit, you get to the community. And if you choose to join the conversation, we have 3 areas in the community right now. Community discussion, this is for questions, where you can ask your fellow users opinions on different items. And just as a sample on that, you can see there's some posts here about who's going to the Higher Ed Summit, Tracking Naming Initiative, a great post from Jane from Wesleyan about joining the community. So as you can follow in the community, you can follow individual conversations by just clicking on follow for that, or you can actually follow the entire community. So if you're following the community, that will push these community posts to your email, so you don't have to be out actually checking on the community to see if anything new is out there. You'll get those sent directly to your email, and you can reply to them from your email as well. Okay. We also right now have a separate section for tips and tricks in the community. We haven't had much traffic there. We may merge these. And then we have a third area that is suggestions for enhancements. So you can suggest enhancements on the community, and we follow these from AffiniQuest as well. So as they're put out there, I or someone will answer you saying, hey, this is already on the roadmap, or no, this is not possible to do, or we'll think about this going forward. So you can review the posts that others have made. You can vote for them. This one has received quite a few votes. Name definitions for accounts to actually exclude deceased from that. So we can get an idea of how popular that is among the group, and and add those to the roadmap as needed. So you can review those, suggest your own, and again, you can follow the individual posts or the entire piece there. Okay, so that's my quick shout out for the community. If anyone has any questions, you can ask me now or send them to me later. And
Jill, yes. I have a point that something I just discovered yesterday that I really like about Zendesk is if you look at your name in the upper right-hand corner and you click View Activity or My Activities, it actually has a list of all the things that, well, for me, all the things that I have posted and then where those stand, whether they're still open, awaiting reply, or a closed topic. So that has really helped me determine my task list as it relates to coordinating with Affinequest.
Okay, wonderful. Yeah, I have a different view because I'm an administrator there, but yeah, so Lisa was saying that if you have tickets with help desk, et cetera, you can click down here and you get a list of those. So that's great. Thank you, Lisa. Okay. All right, so I'm going to stop sharing and I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to Jeff.
Okay, thanks, Jill. I'm going to try to share my screen here. Actually, I'm going to share, I'll just share the whole screen here. So as Jill mentioned, we did a talk out at a conference at Arizona State a few weeks ago. And this was basically a conference for people who were considering Salesforce. So what we did was we presented some concepts that we thought were important about Salesforce to take into consideration when you're thinking about extending it or using it in any way. And a couple of people thought this might be useful for our existing clients as well. So remember, this was sort of written and designed from the perspective that we're talking to someone who's considering buying Salesforce. You all are already using Salesforce, but I think some of the points in here will still be interesting to you in that it exposes some of our thinking, and it may also help you as you continue to extend Salesforce. So one of the things that we often get asked is why we chose Salesforce, and we may have talked to you about this before you even started using Affinequest, but I'll just review it quickly. Obviously, we've got to make choices about the platforms that we work on just in the same way that you did. So we chose Salesforce for a number of reasons. We think it's a pretty solid platform. I think most of you have experienced using it now, not running into maybe some of the kinds of platform maintenance problems you might have had in your former product. And it's also very open with these open APIs for programmers. It makes it easy to extend it for other purposes. The hosting at Salesforce, I think, is really reliable. In fact, our experience is that if someone seems to be having something running slowly, as often as not, it's a problem with their internet connection rather than something at Salesforce. Although once in a while we'll notice a little bit of a slowdown, it is remarkably consistent, we think at least, in its speed. And we'd be curious to hear if other people are having problems with that ever, just to kind of keep on top of it. We like the fact that mobility is built in without really having to do much work. We thought that the fundamental data model in Salesforce was capable of being extended to advancement. We've been pretty happy with how that has turned out. And we think it's really good for software updates. In fact, I'll show you a little bit later on how we update your software for you. And we think it keeps getting better. They've added new things. One of the things they've been working on the last couple of years is artificial intelligence. The problem has been that the models that you use to build intelligence into the product have been limited, primarily to developing leads and things like that we don't do. But Salesforce more recently has been opening up the capability to modify those models for us. And we think now they've opened it up enough that we're going to start working on a model for artificial intelligence inside of Affinequest, probably initially targeting major gift donors. But we may also be targeting non-major gift donors, just to kind of point out this guy looks like he has characteristics that maybe ought to be brought to someone's attention to be considered to put into a portfolio. So they continue to add these things. Incidentally, they always try to come out with some new features for Dreamforce. I don't know what they're cooking up this year, but it'll be interesting to see. Usually they come out with something that's kind of half-baked, but it kind of is a good precursor of some things that are coming. So some considerations for building on Salesforce. First is the account, contact, and householding model. Now, this is really interesting, and I'll bet some of you have struggled with this. This account contact model that Salesforce has is pretty standard for CRM platforms. But interestingly, we found it to be one of the more difficult things for our clients to grasp because it just wasn't out there in Advance or Millennium or any of the older legacy products. But it turns out that it really isn't a bad way to do it. We don't think it's a perfect model, but we think it's as good or better really than anything else we have built. It essentially looks like this. This is what you all are used to doing. An account with constituents associated with it. Now, if you've heard of HEDA, Higher Education Data Architecture, they use a model that looks something more like this. Every contact has their own personal account. They call it an administrative account. And then there are various ways that you can associate the contact to a household, either with the concept you see here, or actually by associating a contact directly to a second account, which would be their parent account. So this is a new concept. Some of you would look at this and think, gee, that just makes it more complex, and you would be right, but it's actually something that Salesforce does in their HEDA architecture. Storage. This is something we get asked about all the time. You do have to take some care because there is a separate charge for storage. If you purchase the unlimited license for Salesforce as opposed to the enterprise license, this is less likely to be an issue for you. So I won't go into all the details, but the unlimited license is roughly twice the price of an enterprise license, but it gives you more sandboxes, it gives you more storage space, it gives you some access to training and so on. You obviously have to judge whether it's worth it to you. If you have unlimited licenses, storage isn't likely to be a problem for you. The other thing that strikes people is that it's expensive. A gigabyte of storage space at Salesforce runs between $600 and $1,200, I think, depending on how much of it you buy, which seems incredibly expensive because I can go to Best Buy and buy a terabyte of storage space for like $50 permanently as opposed to $1,200 a year per gigabyte. But in reality, a gigabyte on Salesforce stores about 500,000 rows of data. That would be 500,000 gift transactions. So while this seems like it's expensive in comparison to what you could buy at Best Buy for storage, in the grand scheme of things of what the system costs, the storage space really is a smaller item in your budget. So I'd take that into consideration if I was deciding to add data, but I wouldn't let it be an overriding factor in my decision because it's just, in the grand scheme of things, not that much. Incidentally, one of the reasons it is priced as high as it is not because it costs them that much to store it, but Salesforce essentially uses the storage space as another way to meter your usage. So think about it. They charge you per user, and that's a way to meter how much you're going to use the system. Another way to meter how much you use the system might be based on how much storage you're using. And that's why that price is what it is. It's a meter of usage as much as maintaining the storage space. Another concern in Salesforce are labels. Now, you know that you can change the names of objects and individual fields. We think it's best to minimize those changes. Now, why is that? Well, once you start changing those field names, they will no longer match the help files. So as an example, we could have relabeled contact to constituent. That really would be the term that's most closely associated with what we do in advancement. But then anytime you went to look in the help files in Salesforce, it would be saying contact, and you'd have to associate it back to your constituent name. And you'd wonder, what's going on here? Why do I always have to think about that? Well, the other thing that it won't match is trailheads. So there'll be trailheads, these new training programs they have that talk about contacts. And if you'd rename them to constituents, then they'd never match up. So basically, we encourage people, pay the penalty of relearning the label name at the beginning rather than pay the penalty the rest of the time you're using Salesforce. Incidentally, a comment about trailheads, if you haven't seen them or used them yet, you ought to go take a look at them. Some of them are really quite good. They lead you through various steps to learn particular processes. And then some of them even give you a trial copy of Salesforce to use with directed exercises. Salesforce has recently opened up the Trailhead developer environment for us to use. Now, there are still some drawbacks. We can't, for example, spin up trial orgs for you from within there. And there are a couple of other drawbacks for us. But there's a pretty strong likelihood that eventually, I don't know if it will be with the summer release or the winter release, we'll have enough access to the trailheads that we'll start building trailhead training for Affinequest. So as I said, better to pay the penalty for learning new systems at the beginning than suffering with it for the whole life of the system. Another consideration, record types. Now, you know we use record types in a number of places. It's sort of a high-level classification. Perhaps the best example would be for accounts. We have corporations, organizations, household, and affiliated organizations. Now, some of you have used the system for a longer period, may not even be familiar with affiliated organization. The primary use for this would be at a university where maybe we've got an alumni club in New York City that's its own legal entity that makes gifts and hosts events and things like that. So they need their own account. That would be considered the affiliated organization. Now, as I just mentioned, we use that record types for our accounts. These can be very useful because we can use record types to restrict pick lists, as an example, change page layouts, all of those different kinds of things to control look and feel for you through the use of record types. However, we recommend that you not overuse record types. Don't go nuts with lots of different record types because they are difficult to change or roll back once you have created them. So if you added another record type for accounts and then decided you want to get rid of it, sometimes it's not too bad, but sometimes it can be very difficult to get rid of it. So be cautious before you add them. They can be useful, but be cautious. Another point that we make is to use objects as they were intended. So Salesforce does lend itself to creative use of objects. Sometimes that can be a good thing. As an example, there's an object called Case. It's a Salesforce object. It's originally designed for tech support, where you would call in to, come to Affinequest and say, I need help on figuring out this report. And a case would be established. That's what it's for. But a creative use of that might be to make a request for a research to be done on someone. So you've identified a potential new prospect, you create a case asking someone to do research and qualify that prospect. Because the case has some other functionality around it, you can do reports on outstanding research requests, you can create a queue, a number of things. That would be a creative way to use an object. On the other hand, some creative uses can be more problematic and not such a good idea. For example, I don't think it's a good idea to put gift shop purchases in with gifts. Yes, it's revenue coming in, but it can become a problem because then every time you do a report off of your gifts, you have to make sure you exclude gift shop purchases. Incidentally, we added a new type of gift method in a recent release. I can't remember if it was the release here in just the last couple of months, I think. And it's called transfer. This is used in an instance where somebody sends you a $100 check, one check, $50 as a gift, and $50, maybe it's a gift shop purchase. You have to deposit that money because you got the check. So you can put in one transaction as a payment, another transaction as a transfer, and that transaction that's the transfer then you would omit from giving totals. And it's a way to basically handle non-gift revenue that comes in on the same check. All right. Another thing to avoid is overloading an object. This is sort of a corollary to use objects as intended. And that is not to use a single object for many disparate purposes. So a better way to do this might be to use, or you might be able to use a record type to distinguish how an object might be used for multiple purposes, such as using a record type to distinguish accounts that are corporations, organizations, or households. However, but using a single object for multiple unrelated purposes tends to lead to much more complex reporting and related list display confusion. So as an example, the Nonprofit Success Pack uses opportunities to track major gift opportunities and gifts. We think that's a bad idea. It's overloading that object for really different purposes. So be careful that you don't get too creative using objects and start using them for things that are totally different, because it just causes a problem, particularly when you're trying to display a related list. Think about it if you were looking at a list of opportunities that included major gift proposals as well as gifts that had already been made. That's a confusing way to have to read through that. So you don't want to use an object like that for more than one purpose. All right, reporting. You all know the drill that we talk about, data consumption. I won't spend too much time on this, but if you haven't been thinking about it recently, what you want to try to do is to have data available when it's needed and available to view. In theory, cut down on the number of reports that you're actually running by having the data available online when it's needed. Serve it up more organically. Look at fundraising campaigns. If you click on the fundraising campaign in Affinequest, it's going to show you how much money's been raised. It shows you every designation, the number of donors, and so on. You don't have to request a report. The data is just being shown to you. So that's what I mean by serving it up organically. Major gift dashboard on a home page. So a major gift officer comes in, they look at their home page, they immediately can see all of their appropriate metrics. They don't have to bother you to ask for a report. Dashboard for the annual fund, always current. Don't need to get special reports. They can just get it from the dashboard. We don't make much use of tab lists, but you know that you can go to a tab and actually create a list or a report there via filtering. Of course, you can have reports emailed to someone. You can also use workflows to distribute information. An example of that would be whenever somebody gives a gift of over $10,000, email the VP. And Einstein Giving. Let me show you this, because probably a lot of you haven't seen this. Let's see if I can come over here and show you. Show you a couple examples of what I've just been talking about. Typical, I'm a major gift officer. Here's a major gift officer dashboard, how much money in opportunities I've won. Here's my portfolio. Here's opportunities that are stuck in a stage. Here's the next scheduled opportunity for or activity for an opportunity. Days since the last activity. Boy, it's been 224 days since the last activity. I ought to be doing something. So that's a dashboard right in place. I've mentioned the fundraising campaign immediate data. Go into a fundraising campaign. Most of you probably have page layouts that already have this on it. So here's gifts by designation. So this big campaign raised $14 million, and $1 million was the Frank Joint Scholarship. Here's an analysis of each of the appeals, total amount of money raised and pledged, as well as the average gift, number of donors, so on. You get that because you do those similar things all the time. What you might not do is filter these. So you know you can create your own lists here. So if you really wanted to get a list of everybody who's 1983 alumnus, you could do that and have those lists immediately handy for yourself. But I want to show you something that probably some of you haven't seen, And what I'm going to do is show you a dashboard that we've done, or a different way to view gifts, actually. Since I'm here, I'll mention this. This is a new feature that we're building right now on engagement. The Council for Advancement and Support of Education put out a position paper last August on measuring alumni engagement. And that's what this is doing, is it's measuring alumni engagement. So you can go here and see how much of a score this guy got for each of these items. And if we were to drill into Thomas Graves' record, we could see each of the items that was added into the score. I'm not going to do that right now. If you're interested in that, you can, maybe we can even set up a webinar for that one time and show you how to set it up. So here are gifts and pledges. You've seen the typical list. But what I want to show you is a way to view gifts visually. Now I'm using Einstein Analytics. Now, typically we go in and we look at a list of gifts. This is this donor's giving record viewed visually. Here's how much money they gave to every fundraising campaign. Here's how much money they gave to every different appeal. Here's how much their money came in for different solicitations. Here are the pledges outstanding in a particular year. Here's how much money was raised every year. Now, if you're curious about where their money went for 2016, you can just click here. And now I see their 2016 giving record. They gave $125,000. And by the way, here are all the gifts from 2016. If what I'm really curious is, I want another 2016 Parents Fund, now I click on that. $10,000 to the Parents Fund, all came in from telemarketing, phone calls, and here are their specific gifts. This, to me, is a much better way for somebody to read giving records than looking at a list of gifts. And I can just as easily back out of this to get it to his complete giving record and look at, for example, well, of all the money he gave to arts and culture, when did that come in? And through what vehicle? So that's another way to consume data. All right, sorry for the little digression there. Let's go back to this. One of the things that I think we're finding is the case is that basic reporting is very good. It's important to learn what it can and can't do, because it can't do everything. Some of the problems are all reports are columnar, does pretty good at charting, we think, and with a little bit of effort, most people can learn Salesforce reporting. It is sort of the democratization of data access. It also enforces security, which is really important. On the other hand, there are some things that Salesforce reporting can't do. Let's talk about some of the other kind of problems with Salesforce reporting. As you know, report types are very, very, very important, critical in setting up Salesforce reporting. We suggest that you create a small number of report types that you train people on and distribute to people. A hint on that is to, where you can, use related objects. I'll give you an example. If the contact is your primary object in the report type, remember that there is a link to the primary education record. So you can pull in data from the primary education record, like the class year and degree, via a related field to the contact in the report type, and it doesn't count as an additional primary element, a primary object. I don't know if I said that well enough that anybody understood it, but it's an important way to do that. If you decide to add objects to your database, more tables, it really is important to take that reporting into consideration when you do that. It can have a profound effect on the ability to use that data in an efficient way in reporting. I think Salesforce reporting can be leveraged to simplify reporting for non-technical users up to a point. We are starting to use on occasion a product called Apsona for more complex reporting, to build forms and to do reporting that Salesforce can't do in terms of aggregating objects. it can get many, 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 many more objects into a report than Salesforce can. All right, next thing on confusion. I put this on here because, is that a question? Is that what that is?
I think it's just a comment that Apsona is awesome.
Oh, there you go. You can read those first and keep track of it. So yeah, Apsona really is pretty good if you haven't used it yet. The two purposes for Apsona are merge letters, like acknowledgement letters. Some of you are probably using Conga for that. And the other purpose is what they call, what do they call it? I should remember. It's not join report. Somebody out there help us who's using Apsona. Multi-step reports, I think they're called.
Yes.
And it makes it very powerful. It essentially allows you to join the results of one report type to the results of another report type and use all of that in the output. Anyway, sorry for the digression. Campaigns. That terminology is really confusing to people because for us, a campaign is like the 2019 Alumni Fund. But in Salesforce lingo, a campaign is a single communication such as an event invitation or an appeal. That is really confusing when you start out with Salesforce. So what we've tried to do is add some things to this campaign hierarchy to make it fit more of what we're doing. So let's just run through that. You all probably know that campaign members are those contacts to whom a campaign is directed. And then Affinequest also adds the capability to add accounts as campaign members in order to direct a single communication to a household. So when you create a campaign, if you create it as an account campaign, then an account will only appear in one campaign member row. So roughly speaking, what happens is that as, let's say Jeff Shy gets added as a campaign member, then when it tries to add Kathy, it sees, oh, Jeff Shy's account is already in the list, therefore I will not add Kathy. And then you can use that campaign member list to export it to send it to a mailing house so you're getting one mailing per household. Now, Affinequest adds a type of object, you all know this, the fundraising campaign to represent 2019 Annual Alumni Fund. And these campaign structures that we create can be very robust. Now, I'm going to show you something that most of you probably haven't imagined before, and I'm going to talk about the Affinequest campaign hierarchy. So at its basic level, we have the fundraising campaign and a campaign appeal. That would be something like the Alumni Fund and current donors would be the appeal. The Alumni Fund is the fundraising campaign. Then under that, we can add a segment. It shouldn't say segment, it should just say segment. These segments could be things like donors that gave less than $100 last year, over $1,000, $100 to $999. Those could be segments. And basically you segment the campaign members by changing their status. So the status of those under 100 might be A, from 100 to 1,000 is B, over 1,000 would be C. Now, you can then create a level called a campaign appeal group that could have multiple campaigns involved in it. So the campaign appeal groups might be the summer mailing that went to a Salesforce campaign appeal of non-donors, Salesforce campaign appeal of current donors, a Salesforce campaign appeal of lapsed donors. And indeed, then you could have a group of campaign appeals under each of these mailing groups, end of the year, summer mailing, phone fund, and so on. Then you can have a funds group that would basically be, okay, here are all the annual funds that we're running, Parents Fund, Alumni Fund, Friends Fund. Of course, each of those can have levels below it. And then that master fundraising campaign. And there can be multiple master fundraising campaigns. Let me point out that we are about to add a new object on here, a new one here at this level, the top level, that's going to be called a capital campaign object. We're doing that so you can have more data within the capital campaign object, like goals and so on. Now, we also have another hierarchy that you can use with class agents. And if you're interested in doing this, we can show you essentially how this sets up. But think about it, in the class of 1990, you have volunteers. Each of those volunteers have prospects. And then you'd have it for the 91 and so on. This roughly breaks down at these levels. Alumni funds the fundraising campaign, class agents a parent campaign. There's a parent campaign under that for 1990. Volunteer 1 has a campaign that then has the prospects that are campaign members. Activity archiving, one of our favorite topics. As you know, Salesforce archives all activities after a set period of 1 to 7 years. And an activity can consist of tasks, calls, or events. Most people want to keep important activities for a longer period of time. So we have created a sort of shadow object linked to Salesforce activity that contains additional data and call report information, which is never archived. So we suggest that you ask Salesforce to not archive your regular activities until 7 years, but you can always keep the activity report object forever. So if it's important enough that you want to keep it forever, you want to use the activity report object. This was released last fall sometime. A word about Salesforce limits. Some of you have encountered them, some of you may not, but there's a limit on almost everything in Salesforce. Now, these limits generally are pretty high. As an example, there's a limited number of fields per object, but you can put like 500 custom fields on an object. And if you put that many custom fields on an object, you have a different set of problems, just probably too many. But they do have those sorts of limitations. Some of these can be a little challenging, like the number of roll-up summaries is limited to 25. There are ways to get around that too that we can talk about if you'd like. So there's limited number of certain fields like formula fields, roll-up summaries, limited number of API calls. Some of you might run into that with your integrations. There's also a limited CPU time for individual transactions. We've run into that once in a while. These seem challenging, but for the most part, they're not. Salesforce imposes these to keep performance at an acceptable level. That's why they're there. In theory, to help protect us from one another so that no one's hogging the system resources. So although these sound intimidating, in real practice, they're not necessarily a problem with proper design. Sometimes it's hard to get around them. We've had a couple of cases where we've run out of CPU time on a transaction because between what we were doing and what was being done at a client site, we were running up against this. In either the client side or us, we've kind of looked at it, looked at our code, tried to make things more efficient or to happen in a slightly different fashion. So you do have to take it into consideration, but it's not quite as limiting as it sounds. Security, well, you know about security, it's profile-based, can get pretty complex. Permission sets does simplify the process. A permission set basically is a group of permissions that allow you to do a certain thing. So for example, you could create a permission set that's designed for gift entry. So anybody you want to enter gifts, you give them this permission set. Instead of having to go into transactions and give them these permissions and gifts these permissions and gift recognition credits, so on and so forth, put it in the permission set and just assign a permission set. Now we've been asked to publish permission sets. Jeff, why don't you just do a permission set for gift entry? Well, I'd love to do that. And while we can publish permission sets in our package, unfortunately, we can't publish permission sets with standard objects in them or where the objects in the permission sets are children of standard objects. Since the transaction object in gifts is a child of the gift that's a child of the account, which is a standard object, we can't send out and package a permission set for gift entry. And then you start looking at it, it turns out we can't publish many permission sets that are of much use, unfortunately. But they're still useful for you to set up. By the way, all this security is applied to reports, which is the way it ought to be, but it does have the potential to confuse somebody. If you limit somebody to only see, say, gifts to athletics, and they run a report of all the money raised this year, all it's going to show is athletics, and they think nobody's raised any money. Clicks, not code. Favorite mantra at Salesforce, try to do clicks, not code. It is possible to do a lot of stuff with clicks. It's getting more and more possible now. If you've seen the newest process builder, do a lot of work with it. They encourage you to use those tools before resorting to code. We do too. Generally speaking, it's easier to update and maintain if you do it without the code. As you know, adding objects and fields is very straightforward. It's almost in some ways too easy. You kind of add junk too easily. There are certain smart fields like roll-up summaries and formulas can help in the clicks, not code effort. If you look at that engagement scoring stuff, a lot of the work we're doing in there is done totally with clicks, not code. Workflows, flows, process builder, process builder allows logic. All of these can become very powerful. If you've not used them, flows, generally speaking, are used for like interviews. Someone is almost like a wizard to collect data. Process builder can apply logic to a workflow, whereas a workflow is just, you gave $5,000, send an email. Process builder can be, if they gave $5,000, I want to send them an email and then look to see if they're in the class of 1980, in which case send them email A, but if they're in the class of 1990, send them email B, otherwise send them email C. So process builder can handle logic in a workflow. And as you know, Salesforce includes fully capable programming language, Apex. Row naming, this is a problem. Each row in Salesforce requires a name. It's sort of the key to the row, but interestingly, doesn't have to be unique. It's important as it is. Row naming can get pretty ridiculous. Think about it. How do you name opportunities? Doesn't that get kind of complex? Some of you have guidelines or templates that you use. Maybe you always use the person's last name plus the kind of gift it is. So maybe it's shy bequest $1 million, something like that. But you want to be careful how you do this. If you're adding custom objects, sometimes you can just use a number field instead of getting any fancier than that. And you look at our education object, and you'll see that the name of the row is just a number because there's just no way to put anything else in there that made a lot of sense. Some standard objects like accounts and contacts and opportunities, these names are just text fields, which makes it all the more difficult to do that in a logical way. So that can be challenging. We think for the most part that we've done about the best we can with that, but I know that some of you have to work through those problems as well when you're doing custom objects. Searching, I won't spend a lot of time on this. This is pretty flexible. You get to decide what gets searched. You can do Boolean searches. I don't know if you're aware of that. You could do something like Graves or Richmond, and it would find anywhere that Graves appears in a name or a street or a proposal, or the word Richmond appears anywhere. You can search on ID numbers. We've had that question a number of times, but if you have a field for your old ID number, you can indicate that that field should be searchable, and you can go ahead and find people by their ID number just like you used to, if you really want to do that. You probably are all familiar with the App Exchange. Now it's over 3,000 applications. Incidentally, you will may have already noticed that Affinequest is not on the App Exchange because we didn't really think it served any purpose. We have, however, recently finally updated our contract with Salesforce. We've had a contract with Salesforce since 2009. They've been wanting us to get on their most current contract. We hadn't done that, frankly, because it costs us money. But finally, they persuaded us to do it. And we signed that contract. We're in the process right now of going through some of the additional paperwork required to be on the App Exchange. And Affinequest will be on the App Exchange, I'm going to guess, in another month or two. we probably don't think we sell really anything over the App Exchange, and it doesn't do you all any good. But in case you've ever wondered why it's not there, that's the reason. Most of these things on the App Exchange are really tools, not an enterprise application like AffiniQuest. Many of them offer free trials, and many are free to higher education. Let me point, however, that some of these free trials aren't actually totally free. The application is free, but it doesn't do anything unless you buy an underlying service that goes with it. So for example, today, you can download Wealth Engine's application for free. It will be useless to you until you have a Wealth Engine subscription. You know about standards. We try to continue to keep up with all of the standards that are applicable to us. There was a slight change in FASB this past year, but we don't think it has impacted us. I already mentioned alumni engagement. And if you're following sort of the rules that we set up and the defaults for giving, there's no reason that your transactions in gift processing can't be audited by an auditor and be fully authenticated in that fashion. A couple of points. As you know, Salesforce updates 3 times a year. You already know that. The updates that we can apply are actually fairly intelligent. As an example, we can't change your page layouts. So if we give you a page layout, once you've used it or modified it, I cannot update it. The theory being that they don't want me to overwrite what you've done. We can't delete fields. Now you're going to see over the course of the next few months that we're starting to delete deprecated fields that aren't in use anymore. But all we're really doing is deleting them from our package. We can't delete them from your site. You have to manually delete them. So you get some configuration instructions that say, if you're not using this field, delete it. And you're wondering, well, why don't we just delete it? Because we can't. Salesforce protects us from basically from messing with data that you might be using. Now, you may know that Salesforce pushes their updates to sandboxes about a month before production. And right now, we are doing updates about every 3 weeks. We don't typically send those out to everybody. There are a few of you that are on a regular plan, but we're now looking at moving everybody to a similar cadence, sort of like what Salesforce does. I don't know if we'll do 3 major updates a year. We haven't decided. We're also discussing doing 1 every other month. We just haven't kind of come to that conclusion, although I think we'll come to a conclusion about this in the next month or so, and we'll start publishing an update schedule. Now, when we do this, we'll push to sandboxes a few weeks before we push to production. And our goal is that everybody gets on an automated update plan. So your choice will either be you're on the automated update plan or you're not, in which case you can just stay where you are forever. But we're going to really encourage you to get on the automated update plan. Jill, and before that, Lynn started working a lot more on making our updates have better documentation and so on. And we now have decent release notes, but we don't necessarily have good documentation or complete documentation or what we might call user notes or training. And one of the things that you'll see that Jill and I have been talking about is that we'll start doing webinars like this for every update release that we have. So we'll go through what's going on, what's new, tell you how it works, and as time goes on, we're going to be dedicating more resources to this. Now, this was my last slide. Don't gulp the Kool-Aid, drink it slowly. If you've ever been to a Dreamforce conference, you know there are a lot of people that have had a lot of the Kool-Aid. Salesforce is great, but you have to understand what it is and it isn't. So just be careful. You often hear that Salesforce can do anything. Your account executive from Salesforce will tell you that. Well, it's sort of true if you have enough money. And just because you can do anything doesn't mean it's that good an idea to do so. You know about that. I think that done right, Salesforce really is a very powerful tool. Now, I want to go in here and show you quickly how we do an update, because I promised I would show you that. So we go into setup, and we look for packages. Here's the AffiniQuest package that we've developed. I click on the AffiniQuest package, and I basically go to versions, and it's going to tell me all the versions we've ever developed of AffiniQuest. I can go to push upgrades, and I want to select for, let's find everybody who's on version 12. And I'm going to schedule a push upgrade. Is there anybody on version 12? No. What an idiot I am. Let's pick 12.1. Schedule a push upgrade. All right, so for example, if I want to upgrade Carnegie Mellon University, I just check them off, and I put in here the time I want to upgrade them, and I click schedule. That is all we do to do an upgrade. It is incredibly simple compared to what we used to do with Millennium, or what Ellucian used to do with an Advance, or what Blackbaud has to do. It's check it and it pushes it. It's very, very, very efficient. So that does allow us to do upgrades for you all in a much more efficient and accurate method than we were ever able to do so in the past. Okay, I think that's all I wanted to try to cover, but I think we're open for questions about what I was talking about, or almost anything else.
Jeff?
Yes.
We did have a question from Lisa on the chat, Lisa Johnson from Western Michigan. She was asking about the deprecated fields, and her question was, does that mean that it is safe for us to migrate data to new fields and delete the deprecated fields ourselves?
If you have a title of a field that says deprecated in front of it, that means we're no longer using it. If you still have data in that field, you can move it to an appropriate place. Now, usually when we've deprecated a field, it's for one or two reasons. Either that functionality is simply no longer being used, or it's been supplanted with some other functionality. So my suggestion would be that you do want to clean those up. If you're doing that, you might want to put a ticket on the tech support site and say, I'm going to delete deprecated such and such, such and such. Any problems? Just to double check. Sometime in the next couple of months, sometime this year, let's put it that way, we are going to try to help you to clean those up, and we'll probably give you some instructions to say, here are the ones that we're going to delete, and you should make sure your data is moved out of them, if you in fact even have any data in them that's worthwhile anymore. You probably don't, but some of you may. Were there some other questions in that group, Jill?
No, that's all the questions in the chat.
All right, so are there other questions that folks would like to ask? Apparently not. It's a quiet group, or they're asleep.
Oh, hang on. We just had one more in the chat.
All right.
Can we talk more about adding feature documentation to Zendesk?
Sure. What would you like to talk about? So let's see if I can get to Zendesk. Okay, the thing popped down there. Now it's not letting me type. Try this again. I'm learning that you can't type as fast as you might like to in Zoom. All right, so I'll sign into Zendesk. And there is some stuff up in here now. And what we have, for example, on release notes, I think these are actually getting pretty good. We'd appreciate it if you agree or disagree hearing from you about that. So, for example, here's 12.1. It is at least a list in some detail of everything that was added or changed. That's well and good, but for example, on the opportunity team member, added the validation rule in date after start date to check. Well, that one's probably pretty straightforward. Maybe this one here, deserves some user documentation saying how that would be used. And we're not doing that very well yet. There are the configuration tasks, everything you need to do to change the security or place something on a page. So in terms of detailed release notes, I think they're getting pretty decent. But again, be happy to hear your comments on that. What isn't very robust yet is the knowledge base. And what's been posted here are just things that somebody asked about that we would eventually, that we might have written something. For example, activity histories in Salesforce. And here people have asked us questions about why the activities don't show up. And what we've done here actually is copied a Salesforce article to make it easier to find it in our area. But this is fairly thin right now. There's also this learning center that has some really old videos. I don't know if they'd be any use to you anymore. So what's happening with this is that we're hoping to put some more resources on doing some more documentation. And the hope would be that we would prepare more mini videos. And we'd appreciate hearing from you all. Would you rather have like 3 or 4 or 5 minute videos on a new feature, or would you rather have 3 pages of text on that new feature? I'm sure Jill would appreciate hearing your comments on that.
So Jeff, I have, there's a little more in the chat on this to say that they would like pictures in the articles and more on, you know, how actually, why certain features exist. And I did do a couple of those. If you go back into knowledge base and go to the one that says archive for address, phone, fax, and email addresses. This one's more of a, you know, how to set that up. But then if you go back to the knowledge base again, and let's see, I did one with pictures in it, and no, I can't remember. But I have, there are some newer ones out there. Actually, if you, Jeff, I'm sorry, if you go back to the categories again, I believe it's on, go back to knowledge base and go to names. There should be a category called
Look
names.
at this, we have this handy search feature.
Using name definitions for account names. That's how to set it up, but then there's also another one that is actually like about how you would actually use that. So how to use, there you go. And that one has pictures in it, screenshots and etc.
This is done with a tool called Screen Steps that we've been experimenting with. This is probably what you were talking about when you said add pictures.
Yeah, so what I've done just for the past 2-3 releases, tried, you know, in addition to the functional, this is how you set up name definitions, I've coupled that with, you know, this is how you would actually use it. So it's small steps there.
One of the things that Jill's been trying to do is to help us get some more efficient tools to do some of these things.
Oh, sorry. We also had a comment that we would like to have information about the, you know, the minimal security required to use a feature. Like as Jeff was saying, we can't actually push out the permission sets, but we're looking at ways to document what needs to be in that permission set.
Yeah, I think that's been included in some of these release notes now, has it not? So let's look in, for example, 12.1 and see if there's any security in the configuration. Configuration tasks.
There's security in there, but there's not like a.
Oh, here it's like here, right here. Set the security field level for the third-party payoff. What it essentially says is, for the batch item within that object, you need to go to this field right here and set a security that's appropriate for your organization. Now, maybe we need to say that in this case, this security needs to be either a read or a write access if you want to do the following things. That's probably what we already ought to add.
Right, and that and more like the whole, you know, in order for Smart Batch to work, this is
Yeah, I see what you mean. So
in one article rather than in
yes, yes.
17
Yep.
different really.
Didn't we have one of those? I guess maybe it was just circulated internally. But yes,
Yeah.
that's a great suggestion. Yeah.
Yeah, just and I'm actually trying to compile that right now, just taking from the release notes and get that started.
Do you get some more questions on those comments that just came in, Joe?
No, they were just some comments about security and that the minimum comment on the minimum security that even for example, the example that David was giving, that even though they don't use events, there are certain things that need to be set up so that there aren't errors in their flows.
All right. Any other questions that we have? So hopefully we'll start having more of these as Joe gets further and further up to speed. But I'm pretty sure we will have one on the next release, which would be 12.2. But that release is a ways away. We're in the process of doing something with Salesforce right now called the security review. I can't tell you anything about it, believe it or not, but we're doing that. And that's going to take us a few weeks, so we won't be doing as much other kinds of work in the interim. And once we finish that,
I'm sorry, Jeff.
I say once we finish that, we'll go back onto our enhancement list.
And 12.1 as mainly probably shouldn't say hodgepodge, but 12.1 is a group of small enhancements. There's nothing big and new to talk about there, so we probably won't do a webcast for that. But 12.2 we will start doing those.
Well, that looks like it's it for today. Is that right, Joe?
That's it. Thanks everyone for coming, and everyone please sign up for the community if you're not already there, and that will also be a good resource for everyone to share ideas and ask questions of peers on more process items. Okay, thanks everybody. Happy spring. And I will post the recording and send out a link to all who attended for that, so that will be available. Thank you.